All right. Hello to everyone who is here. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joe from Toby Dynavox, Jonah Ryan Singh. I'm one of the account managers for the company. I'm based in Manchester, and I've got John Liddell on with me too.
Hi there.
Say that again.
I said hi there.
And we're going to talk you through Gaze Viewer today. Any questions at any time, there's a couple of options. You can either unmute yourself and jump in with a question, it's no problem at all, or you've got an option to click on the chat window and type your message in there. We'll keep an eye on that chat window and answer any questions that you put in. So, Gaze Viewer. I suppose a good place to start will be to show you what it is, and then we'll have a chat about how it can be implemented. So when we're looking at our devices and our eye trackers, there's two sides to the to using the eye tracker, and the side that's kind of most familiar that a lot of people know of and have seen used is eye gaze as an access method. So for people who want to be able to communicate by typing with their eyes or selecting things with their eyes, that's one side of using eye gaze. But the other side that we're going to kind of focus on today, and which is what Gaze Viewer is built around, is the eye tracking side. With Gaze Viewer and with using an eye tracker, we can gather a lot of information by knowing what somebody's looking at, and Gaze Viewer as a piece of software is something that allows us to take advantage of that and then be able to analyze that information to help with our decision making. So we'll show you what it is first, and then we'll get into, as I say, talking about how it can be used and some of the applications. So at this point, John's going to help me because we've got an image up of the screen here, and I'm going to hand over to John to talk us through it.
Okay, so for the next minute or two, you won't see anything on the screen. You'll only hear my voice, but that'll make total sense later. So don't worry that you can't see what Joe's up to. So, hi Joe, how are you doing? I've put a little picture up there for you. I'll just let you explore that. Okay. Right, Joe, on that picture, on the back row, there's a man. He's got brown hair, and I think that could be Dad. Could you find Dad for me? There's a lady on that picture too. She's got blonde hair. She's on the back row. I think that could be Mum. Can you find Mum for me? Now there's another lady there with grey hair and glasses. That could be Gran. There's some children on that picture. There's a boy and a girl with brown hair and a little boy with blonde hair. It looks like they've had presents. The boy and the girl with the brown hair, they've had a keyboard. The little boy with blonde hair, he's had a golf club, and even Mum's had a present, looks like a snow globe. Now you found a picture of Gran for me, didn't you? Let's see if you can find the word Gran. It's actually written there twice, Joe. Can you find where it's written the second time? Okay, now there's a really long word there, ornament. Can you find the word ornament? Okay, well done. Now let's read this. Gran brought presents for everyone. She gave Mum and Dad an ornament, Kipper had some little golf clubs, and Biff and Chip had a keyboard. Thanks, Gran, said everyone. Now I'm just going to see, Joe, if you were following that while we read that. Could you look at the picture of the child that you think could be called Kipper in the picture there? Great stuff. Well done, Joe. That's everything. Now what that's done, hopefully, is done a recording of that full session. Now normally that would have recorded both my voice and any sound produced by the computer at Joe's end, and also what's going on the screen, and of course what Joe was looking at. Now there's one bit, because Joe's up in Manchester and I'm in Cambridge, it can't hear my voice, so I'm going to have to just replicate what you would normally hear in terms of the audio recording. So we'll play that back first, and then Joe can talk you through the various buttons. So at first I just asked Joe to just explore the picture, and I've already learned something about him. I've learned that he likes people and faces. Let's see if he explores the text. He's had a little look at the text, but he's not so interested. So I start talking about whether he could find the picture of Dad for me. Let's see if I can get the sound. So he's found Dad. He's found small blonde. Now I've asked him to find somebody with a lady on the back row. Now he did look at both ladies there, so that I know already he knows the word lady or woman. And he found Mum when I gave a bit more detail about a lady with blonde hair. Now I've asked him to find someone with grey hair and glasses, and he's off there to find that. And then I've mentioned some children, a boy and a girl with brown hair and a little boy with blonde hair. So I can understand, get an insight of what he's understanding, the sort of receptive language levels. I asked him to talk about the present. Sorry, I talked about the presents, the boy and the girl with the keyboard, the little boy's golf clubs, and Mum's snow globe. Now, we told him that he'd found a picture of Gran, and even when I mentioned that, he jumped back to it, but I want him to find the word Gran. Now, he found it straight away because that's the first word, but I'm going to ask him to find the second instance. Now, here he's having to scan. And we see that he finds the second instance of the word gran. Now I'm going to ask him to find the word ornament. He had a little scan again, and then back to the word ornament. I'm going to read this together. Now, normally if we were doing a reading evaluation using Gaze Viewer, I'd probably work on larger text so I could track exactly which word he was reading at any particular time, but you get the sense of how that would work. Now, I asked him as well, in terms of comprehension, whether he could find the child who he thought was called Kipper. Hopefully that's the child with the golf club. Now, he had to go back to the text and check. And then there we go. He's found Kipper. Well done, Joe.
Thank you.
I'll let you just explain the buttons and what have you.
Awesome. So we just jumped straight in there because it's kind of easier to show it than tell it with Gaze Viewer, but we didn't give you much info before we started. So just to clarify what happened, Gaze Viewer is on my laptop, and I've got an eye tracker plugged into my laptop. So when we started, I started recording when John started talking, and Gaze Viewer has been running invisibly in the background, recording everything I looked at on the screen. So you can see from what we did there is that we can play back the whole session, and it will record for up to 30 minutes. And when we play back the session, there's a few pieces of information that we're given. One is our heat maps, and you can turn these on and off. And the heat map, essentially, the longer you look at something or an area of the screen for, it goes red if you've looked at it for longer. So if you glance at something, you've got that kind of greenish color. If you look at it a bit longer, it starts going yellow, and when you've really focused on something, it goes red. So you can use this information to see where someone's looked, or if they have preferred areas of the screen and things like that. The other piece of information that we get is what's called the gaze points or gaze plots. And this, when we play back the video, shows the order in which we've looked at everything, which can be really powerful information too. We can also get an idea of how long I've looked at something for from these gaze points, because the longer I focus on something for, the bigger the circle goes. So hopefully you'll see here when John starts talking about Dad and I focus in on Dad, the area of the circle area is larger, as you can see there. So we'll stop that animation for now. So we can play and pause it. The sound is a really important element, and as John said, because of the way it's set up for this video conference, we can't really show you the sound in action, which is why John had to kind of talk us back through it. But if John was in the same room as me and we were recording the sound, when we play back the video, we would also hear the conversation that's going on, which is important when we're tying in, is the person looking at what we're talking about. We can use this bar across the top to isolate certain areas of the session or cut out areas of the video. We can then save individual images of parts of the session, or then save that video, which we'll touch on, but is an important point when we're looking at tracking someone's progress or providing evidence. The settings allow us to go and make sure the eye tracker is calibrated correctly, and then we can close this down. It's going to ask me if I want to save. And this is actually what Gaze Viewer looks like when you first open the program. I'm going to just minimize that for now because I've got a slide to talk you through it. But when you click on Gaze Viewer on your device or on your computer and open it up, this is what it's going to look like. Are there any questions so far, anyone? Or does that make sense, hopefully? As I say, feel free to post in the chat. If we don't hear anything, we'll assume that's all good and we'll carry on.
Yeah, there's
one question. I did have one question, just because we're now doing a lot of the distance learning with our students. So you weren't in the same room, so it couldn't record. But if you were, say, like doing remote access, like, so if you were sharing the screen, would it hear your voice or be able to record your voice?
It doesn't seem to be able to, because that's effectively what Joe and I are doing, being in
different okay
rooms. There might be a way of fiddling with the audio settings to kind of feed it directly in, but we've not worked it out as yet.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So when you're actually in the room with someone, it's the microphone of the device that's kind of picks up the sound, so therefore picks up the conversation. So you would think that the mic of my laptop would be picking up John coming through the speakers of my laptop, if you know what I mean. But it doesn't appear to be, and we don't know whether it's because we're on Zoom or what.
Okay, thank you. All right.
All right, no problem. Thanks for the question. As I say, don't be shy, guys. Feel free to ask anything at any point. All right, so Gaze Viewer is a piece of software from Tobii Dynavox. It's downloaded from our website and then can be activated on any Windows device. Now, you do need a Tobii eye tracker to use the software. But one of the key points that we're going to keep kind of re-emphasizing as we go through this is it's not just for eye gaze users. We can get a lot of valuable information for those that are using eye gaze. If you think back to that first slide where we spoke about access versus eye tracking, if someone is using eye gaze for access, then eye tracking them can give us a lot of information that's very valuable. But if someone's not using eye gaze for access, we can still learn a lot about them from what they're looking at if they're non-verbal. So worth bearing in mind. As you saw there, the software can run invisibly in the background, and it will record behind or over whatever is on the screen. And we'll talk a bit more about that further into the presentation, but that's a really important point. As you saw, when you open the software, this is what it looks like. You have this panel with 4 options on it, essentially. And the options are to record the gaze and the sound, where it will record just like the example me and John just did. But if John was in the same room as me, the microphone on my device would also pick up the conversation from the room. That's not always suitable, depending on the environment you're in. So you can just record gaze only without the sound. You can turn on live gaze so that you can see where somebody's looking in real time. I'll just do a quick demonstration of that now so you can see what it looks like. Sorry, wrong button. So here's Gaze Viewer open here. I'm going to hit live gaze on. And you can see as I look around, it's going to show where I'm looking in real time. Minimize that. And there are keyboard shortcuts. So when I started recording, we wanted to kind of do it in the background and surprise you guys as you were watching. So I just hit F7. So as long as Gaze Viewer is running and I hit F7, that will start a record. Or you can see F9 is the keyboard shortcut to turn on live gaze. So I've just hit F9 now and live gaze is on. So it means you can really quickly access these tools without having to kind of interrupt your session or bring something up on the screen that might distract the learner or the user. So we'll have a quick look about the applications and how you might start using Gaze Viewer. It's worth pointing out at this point that we kind of well, we'll come to that on the next slide actually, but hopefully you've seen from what we've shown already is that the eyes can be a window into the mind. By knowing what somebody's looking at, we can learn a lot about their cognition, what they understand, how they're processing information, and what they can see. So I suppose what would be good is to kind of get feedback from you guys on where you might think that you could use this or where it might be helpful. Because one thing we've learned through a lot of our devices and technology that we've brought out is that we design and create and bring something out where we have a specific use in mind for it. But actually, once it's out there and professionals start using it, we learn a lot more about new ways that we've not even thought of in terms of how that tool could be used or applied. So Gaze Viewer as a product actually came around because a different division of Tobii. Tobii as a company has three main divisions, us being Tobii Dynavox, who focus on assistive technology. The other divisions of Tobii are looking at eye gazing in other more mainstream areas like gaming and market research and human behavior. And so it was actually, they were using similar kind of products to Gaze Viewer, and we've realized that would be really helpful, you know, in the assistive technology sense. But a lot of our products, once they're out there, like with some of these on here, tennis balls had a really specific design in mind when they were created. But once they're out there and people are using them, they come up with other ways that they can be helpful. So yeah, we just encourage you to kind of feedback anywhere you found that, you know, areas where you're using Gaze Viewer, where it's been helpful, or ideas where you think it might be good to use. But some of the ones that we have used it for, or where professionals have been in touch and said it has been helpful, are the ones that we're going to look at now. So one of those, and kind of the one we demonstrated there, is with Receptive Language. It's a really powerful tool for this. It can help us assess and understand, somebody's understanding of spoken language and whether they understand different words. So by John reading that story to me, and by me following the story by looking at the relevant areas of the picture as he was talking, John knew that I knew what he meant when he said the woman with blonde hair. So he knows I understand what he's saying to him. The fact that the software is content free is a really important point. As we touched on, you can run it behind whatever is on the screen. And what that means is you can use it in conjunction with other tools that you might be using to assess someone's receptive language. So whatever tools you're already using in a particular session, that person's favorite book, whatever it is that motivates them, it can be that that's put on the screen. We're not prescribing to you, this is how you should be doing your receptive language assessments. However you're doing them, this is going to be a tool that can be used in conjunction with it to get more powerful information. And by doing that, we can learn about whether someone can follow instructions, whether they're following the story, whether they're responding to what's being discussed, and it can give us an idea of their comprehension of more abstract language that can be more difficult to assess and more difficult to teach. And as you're working on perhaps some of the more abstract core words, as you're teaching them, you can get a better understanding of whether someone is understanding them and learning. Have you got anything to add to that bit, John, or is there any questions?
No, that's great, and there's no questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so another area where this has been used really successfully, and once again, our demonstration kind of had a little bit of this in it, is when we're looking at literacy. So this is an area where someone might not be an eye gaze user, but by understanding what they're looking at, we can get some information and help around their literacy skills and what we might be able to do to help improve that. Because if we have a book on the screen, we can see how, or even if, the individual is engaging with the words. When John was talking back over the session we just did, I'd not really focused on the words much. I was more engaged and interested in the picture. So even just simple things like that, we can see whether someone's engaging with the words or how they are doing that. This can be a helpful tool regardless of somebody's literacy levels. So it can be for an emergent communicator. Are they engaging with the words? Do they understand some basic words? Through to someone who's reading independently, and we want to start looking at, you know, more complex words or combinations of certain letters that they might be struggling with. We have a piece of software called Reading Avenue that's got lots of accessible books on there that start at a really emergent level through to you know, someone who's reading more independently, and we found that this tool can be used for, you know, getting great feedback regardless of which books the person's using. Oh, sorry, I better plug in.
I had a panic then, I thought that was mine.
So yeah, from an emergent side, we can find out things, you know, really basic things like are they tracking from left to right for reading? It's easy to make assumptions around people based on our own experience and assume that, you know, it'd be obvious for them that they need to be tracking from left to right, but it's not necessarily the case. And by having something like Gaze Viewer, it gives us some objective evidence as to what somebody's looking at. We can find out whether there's certain words or word sounds or letter combinations that might be more difficult than others for somebody. Can be helpful in identifying things like dyslexia, and if there are certain reading traits, if somebody's struggling to focus and their eyes are jumping around or line skipping or skipping words, it can give us some really helpful info. And as John touched on, it can be helpful to have larger text on the screen if you want to get, you know, more specific breakdown. You could see on the quite small section of text, you could see that I was tracking from left to right, and then I was looking at each word, but you couldn't necessarily get more detailed information because the gaze plots were quite close together. All right, so I'm going to hand back to John to talk us through. This is a Gaze Viewer video that we've loaded into the presentation. So when you're ready, John, I'll hit play.
Yeah, press play here. So this is our colleague Tina's daughter, Molly. She was 2 at the time, and she really loved Frozen and Elsa. And we can watch from the video, she's interacting with Elsa, really fascinated and loves watching her, but absolutely no interest in the text at all that's coming up at the bottom. Do you want to just stop that video, Joe? And just go to the next one. And now this is Stuart, who is Tina's older son, who was 5 at the time of this video. And you'll see that Stuart now is much more engaged with the text. In fact, more engaged with the text, even by the soundtrack on Amazon now. He's jumped up to the pop-up at the top. So he's not a big fan of Elsa, but definitely interested in words there. So it's a great, you can stop that now, yeah. So it's a great tool really, just for getting an insight on what's going on. Something that, those little saccades they're called, where he jumped up to the top to the, by the soundtrack on Amazon now. That's not something that you would normally be able to detect. And it's great because you can save off your videos or images from the Gaze Viewer experience. It's great for being able to track progress. So even though this was 2 different people, it could have been Molly when she was 2 and Molly when she was 5, and you'd get an insight of how things had changed over that time. I'll pass back to you though, Joe.
That's brilliant, thank you. So yeah, it can be really good for the next application that we're going to touch on is assessing somebody's cognition. We can provide evidence of if an individual can hear and understand whilst conversation is going on. Being able to show someone something they're really motivated by, because we can put anything on the screen. We can put things they're interested by on the screen. So things like photographs of family members that we can then talk about and watch how they're processing that information, whether they're then following the conversation and looking at those family members. And we've seen this used quite powerfully with reminiscence boards. It can be very helpful for challenging assumptions around competency. You know, we often find that perhaps it was an access issue that was causing someone a challenge in terms of using a device, but assumptions might have been made that it was actually because they didn't understand what was going on. And by having evidence, we could then decipher and look, no, they understand what we're saying. They're trying to look at the correct thing. We've just not perhaps got them calibrated correctly or something like that. And it can also help when there's a disassociation between language and understanding. One of our colleagues, Debbie, was telling us a story about when she was working with someone in a neuro rehab unit, and I think they'd had a stroke, and they were doing some exercises around the different stages of making a cup of tea. And I think they were asked what would be used to kind of to stir the cup of tea once you've made it, and this person still had some language, they could still speak, and they'd said mug. So they'd said the word mug, where you would be, once again, you could assume competency wise maybe they didn't understand what was going on, but looking back using Gaze Viewer, they were actually looking at the spoon, and it was just that there was, because of the stroke, there was a disassociation between saying the word that they were thinking of. And without the tool like gaze viewer, there'd be no way at all to have known that that was the case, and you would just eventually assume that they didn't understand. It can be really helpful when looking at best practice for AAC. In my role, we do a lot of assessments for devices and working with people who use communication devices already. So this is kind of where I use it the most. But it can give us a lot of information that can be helpful, so we get the most out of the device in terms of whether they're able to access the whole screen, whether their dwell time for eye gaze needs adjusting if it's too slow or too fast. By toggling live gaze on, we can be responsive to what someone's interacting with in the moment and in real time. It can help us look at how someone's analysing, we can analyse the decision making someone's making when they're looking for their language in their AAC communication system. We can determine if there are rest spots, so there might be areas of the screen where they don't want to interact with it, it's just where their eyes naturally rest, but because of that they're making kind of negative choices, false choices, when really they just want to rest their eyes, so maybe we won't put language on that area of the screen. It can help us see frequently used areas of the screen or areas of difficulty and how that might relate to how we position their language, which kind of ties back into the rest spot. Once again, it's not just for eye gaze users, so we have used this when we're working with switch scanning users. Is the scanning pattern correct for that person? Is it how they are scanning the page? Maybe we need to do a column row scan rather than a row column scan. Maybe their scan speed is too fast or too slow, or maybe we've not got the correct highlights for their scanning pattern, because we can see that they're not processing. By the time they've read the word, the scan's already moved on, for instance. So could language be arranged in a more efficient way? Is the page too complex for the user? Do we need more or less language? Do we need different button sizes? Once again, separating access challenges from cognitive factors, as we touched on the previous slide. And is their keyboard layout suitable? Are there changes or tweaks we could make to make it more efficient? So I'll pass back to John again. We've got a quick video here to kind of demonstrate that.
This is a simulated video, and you can see the user here is trying to hit targets, but they're offset slightly to the bottom corner, so they're going for all word lists and keep accidentally hitting the share button. And this is back to Joe's point of, is there a, what is an access issue and what's a cognition or a language understanding issue? So now the person's trying to go for feelings, but keeps getting colors. So let's hopefully we get to feelings here. Now they're looking for the word happy. So a lot of scanning around there. We realize it's on the second page. And again, you can see there's an offset when they're targeting happy, but they're able to get it. Now, this is the kind of thing that helps us realize that there's an access issue that we need to solve. It could be that it's a positioning thing or a need for a recalibration, or the button sizes need to be a bit bigger. In this instance, just a positioning change and a recalibration, and we're able to move to something like this. And you'll see the choices are pretty much bang in the center of the buttons, much more accuracy, being able to target properly. Going into feelings. I might choose from this to actually move happy to the front page of that vocabulary as well.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, over to you, Joe.
All right. As usual, I'm running behind, so I'll speed things up a bit. This is an area where I've seen gaze viewer used really successfully in a lot of school settings. Boardmaker is a product of ours, and it's used in lots of special schools and settings to help people. And we often don't know how people even interacting with these symbols. So, are they looking at the symbols, or are they reading the words? Perhaps they're able to read some words and not others, and it might be beneficial to take the symbol out on those and start working on the literacy for that word. Is the image size suitable? Are font sizes suitable? Once again, with the kind of more abstract language, are they struggling with those symbols rather than something like chair, which is more obvious? The symbol for the is much more abstract, and do we need to spend more time teaching that? Are there too many symbols? Are symbols the best thing to use? Perhaps a photograph for some individuals is a better solution than a symbol in some situations. So that can give us really nice insight into those kind of things. And kind of once again, we'll put the question back to you guys in terms of any other uses where you think it might be helpful. Some of the other ideas that we've had from professionals are from visual impairment teams get quite excited about this and getting some insight into what people are able to actually see. Because as we touched on before, we develop the products, but it's only once our customers have used them and they're out there in the world that, you know, new applications we've not considered come up. So, but we know it's used out there for determining people's interests and their favorites. Oftentimes with a lot of our non-verbal communicators, the younger ones, assumptions are made around what they're interested in and what they like. And then once we get them on an AAC system, we find out perhaps they didn't like football all that time. So it can be quite cool for finding out things like that. Often our eyes respond more quickly to things than, you know, pointing or a verbal response. So other ways that it can be applied there. And we know a lot of people are using this for their pre-AAC provision work, try and make sure that the solution that's been implemented is the best one. And then post AAC on the reviews, once the equipment's in, how is it being used? How can we tweak it to make it more efficient or easier for the user? So just before we finish up, just kind of recap. Once we've got our recording, we can save images from that session. We can save videos. That helps us remove the guesswork and make evidence-based decisions, because we can know objectively what an individual's abilities are. We can then use that information to support funding applications. We can also use it to track progress over time and prove ability. And a couple of points to consider when you're using the software are that there is no need to use something else. You don't have to get a phone out and record the screen or anything like that. You know, you hit your keyboard shortcut and the communication partner can really focus on the session and not have to worry about, you know, the evidence gathering side of things. It just happens in the background invisibly. You've got 30 minutes to record. So if you are going to do a session, you could just hit record and have it running in the background with no expectations. And then if something happens that you think, oh, that's interesting, we need that, you can cut out the interesting part and save that bit of the video. It works with anything that's on the screen. So you can be playing a video, have an image up, run programs, run AAC software, apps, websites, anything at all that's on the screen, this is going to work with. So you're not locked into a predetermined content that might not be of interest to the person who's using it. As you saw, it runs invisibly in the background, which is important because we do know people can perform differently when they know they're being assessed. So, you know, when we take that pressure off, that can be helpful. Once again, we'll reiterate, it's not just for eye gaze users. So you know how to get it. It is included on our iSeries devices installed as standard. And for those that don't have an iSeries, it's a Windows software, so it needs to go on a Windows device, and there is a one-day free trial available from our website. It can be purchased for £259, that's a one-off purchase, and it's also available in bundles with our eye trackers, the PCI Mini and the PCI Plus. We'll send a copy of this presentation to all of you guys afterwards, and this link will take you to the relevant area of our website where you can download the free trial. So when we were thinking about how to kind of summarize this, and we decided on, you know, the main point of GazeView is that we don't need to assume anymore. We can understand, we can have evidence of how our AAC users or how the people we're working with are, you know, accessing their device or processing information. So we can actually understand how they're using their eye tracker or their AAC device or interacting with words or books. So hopefully that was helpful and interesting. John, feel free to add anything I might have missed or any questions. As I say, guys, feel free to unmute or type them in the chat.